If you are an investor and you have some capital to deploy, what are your options today? You could be considering the traditional equity markets like United States, Canada, or in Europe as well, which is pretty much all-time high. So your upside potential is very limited compared to the downside risk. So if you look into the residential real estate market, again, the same story. It's too high, if not all-time high. So upside potential is very limited compared to the downside risk. Whether this is in the US, in Canada, in Europe, same story. If you have some capital to deploy, what are your options today? You could be looking outside of the traditional US, Canadian, or European markets like Dubai, which can offer you some alternative options. So in this video, we are exploring some alternative investment options in Dubai, which could offer you some decent returns over the time. So this is not an investment advice. This is just an educational video. We're exploring some options. You should be talking to your financial advisor in order to get a professional financial advice. So without further ado, let's dive into it.
So Yasin, how are you?
Thanks, Wali. Thanks for inviting me again on your channel. I think this has been going very well. I'm constantly watching your videos, so you're putting a lot of good content out there.
Thanks a lot. And this podcast actually was from one of the voice note that you sent me, and then I replied to you back with the 10 minutes voice note. And during when I was just recording that voice note, I was thinking, why not to make a video around this, and then why not to have a podcast around this? So that was the time. Once I sent you this voice note, I thought to have this conversation as well, and then this within 2 days we thought we just are meeting here. So
Exactly.
can you just explain for our new viewers some background from your side?
Sure. So Wali and I are friends from our university days back in Pakistan, and we have been in touch for almost like 20 years now. And I actually went to UK. I think Wali also went to UK for our postgraduate, and then since then we actually departed from our location perspective. So I continued working in the UK and then moved to Canada. And for the last 7 years, I've been living here in Canada, working as an IT professional. But because I also have a passion to kind of study the credit cycles and financial markets, so I've been running my YouTube channel to educate people about financial freedom, financial literacy, and how you can grow your wealth by investing into different financial markets, for example, real estate market or in equity markets in the US. So that has been my journey, and I think we have a lot of common things between myself and Wali. So we have always been in touch and sharing ideas and thoughts, and that's how it started, right? So I asked Wali, Wali, could you help me to explore some options in Dubai in terms of investment? And that's how this whole conversation started. And we had chatted, on voice notes, and we thought, okay, let's do a podcast so that we can explore these options, and we can also, spread this across the community.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, I also do a lot of videos around investing, personal finance, even let's say real estate, immigration, moving here and there. So a lot of things have been going on my channel as well. And I thought that this would be a great idea to have this kind of conversation as well, because Yasin was thinking about diversifying his investments in terms of geography, let's say in different locations. So I would ask Yasin, let's say, what is the thought process that you are going through, and why do you think that you want to diversify away from Canada, maybe to the US, maybe to the Europe, or let's say Dubai, or wherever, whatever the case is. So what is the thought process behind this?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been living here in Canada for the last 7 years, and when I moved initially, Canada was of course one of those destinations where everybody wants to move, right? Because it's very diversified, growing country. Canadians by nature are very polite and very welcoming, so I always find it like my second home here, right? And then slowly, I was building my investment portfolio because I was working as an IT professional, but also I wanted to, make sure that I invest my capital into the assets that are going to grow over time. So I think until like COVID, everything was pretty normal, and then once the COVID hit, everything was completely restarted, and we saw how the financial markets and even the housing market behaved after COVID, right? So there was a big boom after that. Of course, there was a lot of investment options available, and the liquidity was flowing like a river, right? And So of course, a lot of people made money, through the COVID times because everything was booming. You don't have to be a genius to make money during COVID times. So people were just buying any meme stock, and then it was going through the roof. And then after, like, 2-3 years, now the things have settled after COVID. Now we're seeing, who's been swimming naked. The tide always, keep the boats up. When the tide goes away, then you see who's been swimming naked. So now we're seeing that the real estate market in Canada is almost crashed, I think. But I think we're seeing the property market is not growing anymore. It is actually moving sideways, and with the high interest rate, it's becoming impossible to sustain the investment properties. Even, if you're owning your own home, it's very difficult to sustain your mortgage payment because of the high interest rate. And if you look at the economic projections, it doesn't look good. Like, it looks like it's going to further deteriorate over time before it can start improving. If you look at the equity markets in the U.S., it's all-time high. It can further go up another 5-10%, who knows? But I think the potential to go further up is less likely, and the downward risk is more likely. So if I am the investor and I have capital to deploy, I would be thinking, twice before deploying capital in U.S. equities or in Canadian equities or even in real estate, right? So in this scenario, if I have to deploy my capital, what options do I have? So this is where I was exploring other markets like Dubai, like, other European markets, and maybe in Asian markets as well. Who knows? Like, you may have some growth options available in some of the Asian countries as well. So I think Dubai was one of the options where I was seriously thinking about it, and thinking, okay, if I want to deploy my some of my capital, not everything, some of my capital outside of Western equity markets, what options do I have? And this is where I was thinking Dubai might be one of those locations where I can move some of my capital. Maybe I can explore some equities and securities in the Dubai stock market, or maybe real estate as well. Like, maybe the rental potential from real estate perspective is much better in Dubai compared to Canadian or US markets. So
Yeah.
that was my thought process, and I was exploring things, and I thought, maybe I should talk to Dubai, to Wali, because Wali has been in Dubai for last, I think, 10 plus years. So he may have a lot of perspective in terms of the investment options. What are the pros and cons? So that was my thought process to kind of explore that. If you are an investor in the US, in Canada, or in Europe, and you are considering investing into Dubai real estate market, this video is for you, because we have a platform called Stake, which allows you to invest into the residential real estate market and start earning rental income right away without going through a lengthy documentation process or coming up with a heavy down payment. Stake is built upon the concept of crowdfunding. So it is democratizing the entire investment strategy, and allows you to own a single unit of the entire investment portfolio. So you don't have to own the entire property, right? You can be part of the pool that can actually own a piece of property, a piece of real estate. So that allows you to start with as low as 2,000 dirhams, and you can slowly ramp up. So as you start investing into it, you can not only own a bit of real estate, but you also get a portion of the rental income on monthly basis. So it's a passive investment strategy, diversifying your portfolio from traditional North American or European markets into Dubai, which is hustling and bustling and growing very fast, and allows you to build your wealth over time. So don't delay. There is a link down there in the description. If you click on this, it will give you free 200 dirhams in your account right away to start with, and you can thank me later.
So, Yasin, you've told me that there is a bitter experience of yours in terms of real estate in Canada, that you were not able to evict your tenant. First, you tell me the story, and then I'll tell you the solution, what Dubai offers for that.
Yeah, sure. So I only had one rental property. Don't have a lot of them, and this was I purchased before actually the COVID time. So it was back in 2019, and pre-construction property from the builder. I immediately leased it to the tenant, and for the first 2 years the tenant was fine. They were paying rents on time, and the property was maintained very well. But after 2 years, they stopped paying rent, and I was trying to negotiate with them to find a solution. Maybe you can start paying some rent until your situation gets better, but they completely stop. And then I have to file an application to evict that. So in Canada, so you have to go through a board to basically initiate the eviction process. You can't just do it yourself. So and because of the COVID, everything was, piled up. So the backlog for applications was like 1 year before you can get the hearing from the landlord and tenant board. So it took me like a year and a half to get the eviction done. And during that time, I was not collecting rent. So I was paying mortgage from my own pocket. I was paying the property taxes and water charges from my own pocket without collecting anything. And then when the eviction was done, I could not recover my losses. So that was a bad experience in terms of maintaining the property, because it's very easy. The property gurus on the YouTube channel, they will tell you, how easy it is to scale the real estate investment portfolio, but it's all only looks good on the paper. Once you get into the details in terms of handling the tenant situation and then all the maintenance issues, it's not easy, and it's not, it doesn't really always look profitable. So that makes me realize, it's a lot of headache, and then there is a lot of risk associated, especially in this market where there's no property appreciation. So maybe I should liquidate that property and move that capital into some other asset classes where I can, see some growth going forward. So yeah, that was the experience.
If somebody tells me that, okay, this property is providing me, let's say, 15% of returns, then I would go for it, because it's not passive investment. This is not at all passive investment. You have to factor in a lot of issues. Anyways, now we talk about, let's say, Dubai. So Dubai, first of all, there is no way that a tenant can default on their obligations. Yes, they can default. I mean, they can default, but the process of eviction is very easy and convenient. So they favor the landlord in terms of eviction of the landlord, in terms of non-payment. So there are other issues as well which the landlords here, let's say, complain about. But listening to Canada's story or Western countries' stories, I think those are not at all problems. I'm going to talk about them as well. But let's say if you want to evict a tenant due to non-payment, it's not a big issue. You can just go to the real estate department, and based on your application, they might even involve police, and it can be done. And I haven't seen anyone let's say, stuck in this situation for more than 3 months. So that is the maximum time I would assume that anybody would be facing this kind of mayhem. Now, there are issues which can happen in Dubai real estate as well, but those are again not pertaining to your eviction requirement. Because let's say if Dubai has recently, in last 3 years or 4, it has gone, let's say, property prices have gone 3 times or even sometimes 4 times as well in some of the locations. So for that matter, of course, the rent also increases. And Dubai's the law is that if certain percentage of increase in, let's say, if I have 2 blocks in, let's say 2 villas in same block, and one of the villa is rented out at, let's say, 100,000 dirhams per year, and the other one is also rented out at 100,000 dirhams per year. But at the time of renewal, now one of the tenant go away, and the other, let's say, villa A tenant remains there. So the one which goes away and I have to get a new tenant, maybe it can go up to 150,000 dirhams because of the rental market. Now I can rent it out at 150,000 dirhams. But the villa A, I can only,
One point.
yeah.
Just to add something. So I think for the audience, especially in Canada, they may not realize the rental agreement in the UAE is based upon the annual rent, not
Yeah,
monthly rent.
yeah.
So in Canada or in the other Western countries, you actually pay monthly. So you
Yeah.
you file you file a 1 year lease agreement, but you actually pay monthly installments for the rent. But in the UAE, I
Yeah.
think you pay in advance, right?
Actually, no. Yeah. So I'll tell you. So basically, there are flexibilities now, but in like early days, it was annual rent, and you have to pay it in, let's say, 6 checks, 4 checks, 2 checks, even single check as well. But now they are flexible enough to let you pay monthly as well. But the rental is always calculated annually. So
Annually.
whatever the numbers are, it is annual. So let's say
Right.
if Villa A, which is being renewed now from the same tenant, it's 100,000 dirhams, and the Villa B, which is to a new tenant, is going to for 150,000 dirhams. So at that time, you might increase it to, let's say, 110,000 dirhams, 115,000 dirhams, and the landlord, the landlord is able to only go that far. you may not be able to increase it to that level of 150,000 dirhams. This is what the landlord cries about Dubai, because they say that this is something which is not favoring them. But eventually, let's say if 1 year passed, 3 years down the line, you will eventually get that to that level. But the flip side is that as soon as the rents go down, that impact is done immediately. So that is something you have to understand. But at the same time, one has to see that what are the options to evict the tenant in that case. So there are only two reasons that you can evict the tenant in case you want to have your property back, because non-payment is not an issue because tenant is paying you properly. It's just that you want to have higher rent now. So there are only two ways that you can evict the tenant, and that is, let's say if your property needs major maintenance, and for that you need to evict the tenant, and the maintenance has to be done after vacating the resident. So this is one thing.
Right.
Second thing is that if you want to move yourself or your family member is moving there, then only you can evict the tenant. Otherwise, there is no possibility that you can evict the tenant.
Same here.
So
Yeah,
same there.
we have the same laws here in Canada, so you cannot evict the tenant without any proper justification. And these are the three things I think we also have here. And with regards to the rent control you mentioned, so in Canada, I think in US as well, the rents are controlled by the government. So government dictates that how much percentage of the rent you can increase per year. So I think during COVID times it was freeze. So there was no rent increase was allowed. So the rent increase was freeze. But I think after the COVID was cleared, then the government allowed landlords to increase the rent, annual rent, by let's say 1% or 2%, depending upon how they set it. So is there
so
also the
1% or
same case?
2% is actually nothing.
It's nothing,
Let's say,
exactly.
yeah.
Especially
So
in a high inflation scenario where
yes.
the inflation is running 6%, 7%, and you only allowed to increase rent by 1%, which is of course nothing, and the landlord has to pay from his own pocket in terms of the wear and tear and maintenance of the property. So in UAE, is it the same regulation from the government, or is it like a loose regulation that landlord has to follow? And if they increase it, is there any penalty or anything like this? Because in Canada, if landlord increases the rent, let's say by 5%, and the government regulation is let's say 2%, then the tenant can report that landlord to the government, like the landlord and tenant board, and landlord has to be basically pulled
No,
back
no,
from that position.
reporting is there as well, and it is also followed up properly. So
Okay.
if you're increasing way much, but again, 2%, 3% is something which I don't fathom. It is something which is not. And I haven't seen something increased by 2%. I have seen people complaining about 10%, 15%, 20%. Even the building I'm living in Sharjah, and the building here is, the building codes are different here, and the rental codes are completely different than Dubai. Here, you cannot increase the rent for Sharjah. Just I'm telling for the knowledge that for Sharjah you cannot increase the rent for 3 years. So if I get into one property and that property is occupied by myself for the next 3 years, the landlord cannot increase the rent. The rent can decrease because of by virtue of the situation of the market, which happened with me as well, because I rented this in 2009. But you cannot increase this within 3 years. But after 3 years, it can go anywhere. So it's very funny. Like when I started living in this building, my apartment was at, let's say, 90,000 dirhams per year. But the last year that I renewed, it was around 54 or 55,000 dirhams. But this year, when I'm going to increase it, I mean, the landlord is going to increase it, it's going to be 80,000 dirhams per year. So from 55,000 dirhams to 80,000 dirhams in a year. And nobody can say anything. The reason is that the laws are like that. Because I think the government thinks that if you have passed 3 years in one property, it's the landlord's right to do anything after that based on whatever the market is performing. So this is what Sharjah is doing. But Dubai is completely different. Dubai, you can increase the rent from the second year or the first year, let's say, and based on the market. But they determine the value of the rent. But at the same time, one should understand that one apartment can have some upgrades done and the other apartment doesn't have it. So it cannot be like 100%. So if you dispute the increase of rent, then you have to justify that as well. But in all cases, you cannot be deprived of the rent. That's the point.
Okay.
That's the main point. You cannot be deprived of the rent. Maybe your rent will not be as high as you want, but you cannot be deprived of that. That's the main thing. So that's the thing the investors are liking as well. That whatever the case is, you can, and you're open to have, let's say, Airbnb. You can go for long-term lease, whatever you like. As I heard that in Canada, they have asked landlords not to give the properties on Airbnb for certain amount of time or certain type of properties.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like, this is a freedom that you're getting here. You can do whatever you
Yeah.
want. It's not government is not binding you.
Yeah, I think so. So for my audience, I think they are pretty much against this whole concept of using housing as an investment option, which to some extent is totally fine and understandable. Um, but a lot of investors deploy capital in residential real estate market, and I think because of the crisis that we have in Canada with regards to housing, the government is making those law changes to kind of restrict investors to use their property for Airbnb or short-term rentals, because the rental market is also going through crisis, and we don't have a lot of inventory because a lot of properties that the investor purchase, they are moving away from the long-term lease into the short-term lease. So this is being discouraged, and rightly so. But I think from an investor perspective, and we're just exploring options. So from an investor perspective, I think it makes it more viable for investors to deploy capital in Dubai real estate market, because it gives them the freedom to use it for short-term rental, for Airbnb, and you are not really restricted to keep the rents at 1% or 2% as dictated by the government. You can increase it as per the inflation, as per the average rent that is happening, that is being negotiated in the community. So I think that's an important point to understand, that if you are a landlord and you have capital to deploy in residential real estate market, it's more favorable in Dubai versus in Western market. So that's one positive point. And we also have to cover the negative points as well. So we have to understand what are the risk associated with that. If you are a real estate investor in US or in Canada, and you want to diversify your capital, let's say you move your capital into Dubai to buy a real estate market, what are the cons comes with that? What are the risks with that option? So let's talk about that as well.
There's one more thing. In Dubai, things happen very quickly. The thing is, there are a lot of empty spaces right now. Also, they are developing far-flung places within Dubai, which I cannot see happening in Canada. Like Canada, I don't know how long does it take to develop a community or develop a tower or things like that, because in Dubai it may take 3 years to 4 years just to develop one tower completely, and people can start living in there. So and also a community can be built up very quickly as well. A villa community can be there available within 2 years. So supply currently the supply is the supply is there, but of course people are coming as well. So I'm not sure. I think Canada has almost 500,000 people coming in
Per
every
year.
year.
Yeah, that is the target by the government, but for the last 2 years, it has been exploded, that target, because there's a lot of temporary residents coming in, and mostly are like students, international students, and work permit holders, and that number
The
has gone to
500,000
like
doesn't
50.
include the 500,000 doesn't include the temporary residents.
No, only permanent
Ah,
residents.
okay,
Yes,
okay.
and I think that this was one of the mistake from the government, that they did not estimate or project, how many international students and temporary residents could come along with that, and because of that, that number has exploded. For the last 2 years, we are seeing around 1.5 to 2 million people came into this country.
So that's the thing. So here the government estimates are almost 5.8 million people in Dubai only by the year of 2040, and if we compute roughly, it's making around 150,000 people coming in Dubai every year, which is way more if you talk about in terms of the land mass, Canada compared to UAE or Dubai actually, not to even UAE, it's only Dubai. So it's a way more number. So the thing what the government does here is they act very quickly. Like have been here for last 15 years. Again, I have seen building out of nowhere within few years. Metro is coming, like metro train was constructed in 2010. They started operation there. Now it's on the like it's so crowded right now. You have to sometimes forego 2 or 3 trains. They are building up the network. They are increasing the carriage, but they are working on it. So the thing that you can rely on Dubai is that the infrastructure can be created out of nowhere. You can be just surprised that okay, this community was not there 2 years back, but this out in the desert they have
Pretty
built up this
fast.
community,
Yeah.
which is I think not possible in Canada. They have certain building codes which makes
Yeah, it's
things
more the
very.
red tape. It's more the red tape, the planning process, the permit approval process that takes a lot of time. And to some extent, a condo project like an apartment project, it takes between 5 to 6 years from the design, the permit, the planning, all the way to the construction completion. It takes easily 6 years, and that's just the condo project. Of course, you have to develop the amenities along with that. The sewage, the electricity, the gas connections, the internet connections, the roads, and all that stuff. So I think it takes longer for sure. As you're highlighting, Dubai, in Dubai things happen pretty fast, and I think that's another issue that we have, because we have a lot of red tape, bureaucratic process that the developer has to go through before they can actually start the construction.
This is a pro as well as con as well, because then because currently Dubai is having an influx of people. They've got so many after COVID, especially because we will just talk about the property prices, stock market, and these things.
Mm.
But after COVID, they have made visa regimes very very easy for people to come in. They have been given golden visas, green visas, freelance visas, and all kind of visas. They're available for many people. At the same time, people of course love Dubai and they come in and they spend money and these things happen. And also geopolitical situation all over the world, especially with the Ukraine thing and Russia going on, a lot of capital came from there as well. So people have been coming here and love living here. But at the same time, if everything goes well around the world, it might happen that people won't want to live in Dubai. Although it's very difficult, because I've been telling people that Dubai is addictive. Whoever comes here, it's very difficult to leave the country, because leave the city itself, because it's giving you so many like the services that this city provides, from let's say house help to let's say your excellent network of roads, excellent transportation, excellent malls. You can go even people don't know about it, but who haven't come to the UAE before. But the country itself has a lot of outdoor activities as well, especially in the winter months, which starts from let's say October until April. So those times you can do a lot of outdoor activities as well. They've got wadis, they've got mountains, they've got green areas as well. So there are so many things that you can do within this country, within the city as well. So this is something which is addictive. So although there are signs that maybe geopolitical situation eases, and then people think that okay, this influx will go away, but I think that it's a small place. I mean, everybody knows Dubai. Dubai is a brand. So even though things might ease off in other regions, but as a brand, Dubai will attract people, and people will love to come to Dubai. They will spend money here. They love spending money. They jokingly say Dubai as Dubai. So basically, once you come here, then Dubai,
You
buy
make sure you
anything.
buy. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so that's the thing. So and it's the destination for riches. So that's the brand that they have created, Lamborghinis and police cars, whatnot. So this is something. There is pros and cons of rapid development as well. But at the same time, as you were saying, you are doing diversification. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So for
That's right.
diversification, this is the best bet.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So, and I think for the past 20 years, we are seeing Dubai has been growing like crazy. There was, of course, some impact as part of the global financial crisis in 2008, when the property market crashed, and I think it happened in Dubai as well. But then since then, it has been I think it was after 2008 crash, the property market was kind of staying flat, and I think it started growing up, after COVID. Is that correct?
COVID was like, if I can give you an example, that people have purchased who had the vision or who had reliance on Dubai. They have I know few people who have purchased one. Just to give you an example, one guy I know who purchased a villa for 2.7 million dirhams, and now that villa is around 5 million dirhams, and he purchased on mortgage. So you can imagine that he's only putting his 800,000 dirhams, and now for the last 3 years he's been paying mortgages, but right now the property worth is 5 million dirhams. So it's huge impact. I know I've got this podcast with Mr. Khurram as well. He purchased a marina property for I think 300,000 dirhams. Now the property is worth 600,000 dirhams. So the property doubles, and then the rent which he's getting on the investment property, that is also updated from whatever the current rates are. So these are the things. Yes, of course, COVID because I think COVID happened for Dubai. COVID happened as a blessing, because they were not having this kind of vision earlier. They came to know about this later on. Once COVID happened, people come to know that, okay, we can work from home, we can work from anywhere in the world. So Dubai is the place you can start working in case you have making good money, because making good money is important for Dubai, because you can have good salaries. But if you're thinking about coming to Dubai on your existing business, then you have to make sure that you're making good money, because it's expensive. Although, again, it depends on person to person. I've got a comment on the other video. They were saying that we don't have any kids, so there is no point for us to live in Canada. And I was thinking that it doesn't make sense for somebody paying more taxes than a person who is having family and is still deprived of good services. For that kind of couple who doesn't have any kid, it's better to come to Dubai, and they can have a blast of the lifetime.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why I was thinking is because of the cash flow. So if I'm an investor and I want like a regular cash flow, so I have two options. Either I buy some stocks which are going to pay healthy dividend. Okay. So in Canada, unfortunately, the dividend payment is also taxed. So you have to pay tax on the dividend income. It is considered as like a additional income on top of your existing income stream. So that's one thing. Number two is if you're buying, let's say, an investment property and you're putting a tenant into it, there is no possibility of generating cash flow anymore, because the interest payments are so high. Even though the rental payment has gone up as well, but the interest payment are so high, it is not only offsetting it, but it is also consuming all the income that is coming as part of the rental. So you end up having negative cash flow on those real estate properties, unless you are, let's say, in Calgary or other markets where the property prices are lower. But let's say if we talk about the major markets like GTA or in Vancouver or even in Montreal, having a cash flow generating property is very difficult. So even if I want to just generate regular cash flow, let alone the overall property acquisition, I think Dubai seems to be attractive, because there is a lot of room to kind of generate cash flow. So the property prices have gone up for sure, but then because the rents have also gone up, so the rent payments are enough to not only cover your mortgage payments, but also your wear and tear and expenses. And even after deducting everything else, you still have some sort of a positive cash flow to pocket the profit in terms of that return. So that is giving me an option to consider, because I cannot generate cash flow in Canadian real estate market. Yes, I can make some dividend payments out of equity markets, but then of course I have to make sure that I pay tax. Of course, I have to pay tax on my foreign income here as well. But then of course I can manage it in terms of how I want to minimize my tax liabilities. So that was one of the advantages that I was thinking maybe I have if I invest into Dubai real estate market.
So I'll just give you a few things. While you were talking, I was thinking on few lines. So first of all, if you invest in Dubai real estate, you don't have to. There is a cost of acquisition of a property. Let's say if you're buying a property, just consider, or I'm not sure about Canada, but consider about 7% to 8% is your property acquisition cost. So let's say if it's same here, right? Okay. Yeah. But then after that, you don't have to pay anything apart from the service charges. So if the property is having any service charges, that's fine. If you want to exit the property, let's say sell the property after 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever the time frame is, if you're in profit, the profit is with you. So or if you're in the loss is with you. So the profit is not taxed. That's the good thing. So there is no capital gains tax. So the story that I've told you about one of my friend who purchased the property, let's say for 2.8 million, so not sold yet, but it's of 5 million right now, and he put only 800,000 dirhams at that time. For him, if he sells the property, he doesn't pay anything. He doesn't pay any capital gains tax or anything like that. Similarly, if we talk about,
So
let's say,
just to add
yeah,
one more point. So the person that you're referring, he's based in Dubai, right?
yeah, he's based in
He's a
Dubai.
Dubai
Yeah,
resident.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
for my audience,
Now,
if you are
yes.
if you are a US resident or you are a Canadian resident, you have to declare your income in Canada or in the US as part of your foreign income, because you have to file your taxes, when you file your return next year. So even though you're earning tax-free income in Dubai, so from Dubai law's perspective, it is tax-free. But when you report that income into Canada or into US, you are tax liable for that portion.
Of course, of course. But now let's talk about someone who has moved from Canada to Dubai, let's say, or from the not from the US, because US is a different category, and I don't want to talk about that because they are liable to tax even if they are not being resident in the
Yeah.
US. They have to pay taxes. But let's say for a Canadian who is coming to Dubai and living here, and even if he's got a business in Canada, he might have to pay taxes on his business in Canada, because I've known some people who have their companies set up in Canada. The companies are working fine, they are paying their taxes there, but they have moved themselves and with their families to Dubai, and now whatever income they're generating in this country, in Dubai, they're not liable to pay on that income or
Yeah.
whatever the revenues they're getting, because they are non-residents of Canada now.
Yeah, it
So
depends upon your tax residency status. So if you are
yeah.
not a tax resident in Canada anymore, then you don't have to pay tax on your foreign income, right? So because you are supposed to be paying tax in that country, even though Dubai has no taxes on the income, but that's another story. But from a Canada perspective, if you are not a tax resident in Canada anymore, you don't have to pay tax on your foreign income.
Right. Similarly, let's talk about, let's say, the stocks. So first of all, I'm going to talk about people who are living in Dubai. So if you want to invest in the US stocks, the good thing is that for the US resident, I'm not sure about Canadian resident. So let's say if you receive dividend income from your US stocks, do you know what are the dividends tax that you have to pay? Any idea on that?
It's basically your margin and tax rate. So basically what happens is
Okay.
if you have generated some income through dividend payments, at the end of the year when you file your taxes, then you have to report that as an additional income on top of your existing income stream. So let's say if I'm a permanent employee, a salary employed, then I have to declare, let's say I have earned $10,000 as part of the dividend income. So that $10,000 will be added on top of my my existing income, and then the overall tax marginal rate will be applied on that.
I won't talk about Canadian or the US citizens here, but I'm going to talk about someone who lives in the UAE first. So let's say if you're living in the UAE as a Canadian resident, Canadian citizen, resident in the UAE, or any nationality living in the UAE. So if you invest in the US stocks, straight away the dividend tax you will be applied is 30%. So let's say if you invest in a company which is, let's say you invest $100 in one of the companies, and you receive a dividend of let's say 3 dirhams or $3 in 1 year, you will be straight away liable to pay. In fact, they will be even not transferring that amount to you. They will be deducting the dividends directly, which is 30%. So $3, 30% of $3. So 90 cents you will not be receiving, but that whatever you receive will be yours. I mean, you don't have to pay capital. So that let's say $100 stock goes to $1,000 value, it doesn't matter. It's only the dividends that are being taxed at. So dividends are not usually a large number. So at max, I've seen companies paying 5%, 6% at max. Otherwise, good companies are even paying 3% only. So that is the only tax that you're going to be applied That too, not by the UAE government or Dubai. It will be through the brokerage house, whatever you're using for the US stocks. Now,
Yeah,
if
it's called withholding tax. So the US
this is
government,
withholding tax, yes, yes,
they keep that withholding tax even before you sell it.
yes,
So
exactly.
so
So
that
that is the
explains.
only tax, and that is for everyone, I think, no matter
Yeah.
where you live. So now, for let's say if you want to invest in the UAE stocks, if you talk about that, the good thing is that you don't have to pay at all any kind of tax. Either it's dividend tax or withholding tax or capital gains tax, nothing. So I'll just give you an example. So I just told you that there is a property which went from 2.7 million dirhams to let's say 5 million dirhams, let's say almost doubled in price. That was an MR property, which was like MR is a big developer here in the UAE, biggest developer actually in the UAE. So one of the villas went from 2.7 to 5 million within 3 years. But MR's stock itself, the company's stock, went from I think $2 or 2 dirhams to 8 dirhams in these
Oh,
like last 4 years. So
four times.
there is another option. Anybody thinking about investing in Dubai, it's not only the properties. You can invest in the again. This is not an investment advice because Emar's stock is still not all-time high. They have gone into all-time high territory, I think, in 2008 when before the financial crisis. So
Yeah.
it's still not all-time high. So anything can happen with the stock market. But I'm just telling you how you get impacted. Like if somebody would have purchased Emar's stock instead of a villa, they would have got the 4 times returns, except that they would have, of course, not used the leverage on the stocks. That's the thing, actually, that I want to tell everybody that when you are talking about properties, we talk about leverage a lot, while we don't talk about leverage in the stock market. If you want to do apple to apple comparison, you have to apply leverage to both. Of course,
Yeah.
applying leverage to stocks is very dangerous. It's not, at least I cannot do it. So
Yeah.
applying leverage to a property is easy, and it's a norm, which again I don't see. It's difficult. It is scary as well sometimes if you're over leveraged, but it happens. But leveraging stocks is not something which everybody does. So
Exactly. Yeah.
so this is another option that you can do. Let's say invest in the UAE stocks. Again, UAE stock market has gone. I think S&P 500 since the COVID has doubled its market cap.
Mm.
If you talk about good stocks like Apple and Amazon, they have also increased their worth maybe 4 times or 3 times, whatever the case is. But in terms of Dubai index itself, DFM index, it has gone at least 4 times since the pandemic. But at the
Mm.
same time, we have to understand that if you see 10 years before that, there was no activity, there was hardly any movement at that time. So again, these investments can be flat over the long period of time. We have seen US stocks as well since 2001 until 2010, I think. They were not having any movement whatsoever.
Mm.
So this can happen anywhere. So, but again, diversification, in terms of diversification, Dubai is a very nice place to have some kind of investments done and
Mm.
get some tax-free benefits.
Yeah. And all these equities that you mentioned, MR, for example, do they also pay dividend as well?
Yeah,
Are these
yeah.
dividend paying stocks? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
What is
so
their
so
dividend
basically,
policy?
dividends in this market is not uh, as proper as, let's say, talk about REITs in the US. So reality income will pay you dividends in all cases. Even in pandemic, they were paying the dividends. But
Right.
MR stopped paying the dividend, as far as I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody of you who's listening to the podcast. But I remember that they're not consistent. So consistency is sometimes missing, but this is because
Mm.
of the situation, whatever is going with the company. But yes, they pay dividends as well.
Okay. Okay, good to know. So yeah, I mean, this is basically just an educational, thought process that we are just going through to see, okay, if I'm the investor and I want to diversify my capital, what are my options? Do I continue, investing into U.S. equity markets or even Canadian TSX index or real estate market, um, or I should explore some other options because the upside potential is, I think, lower than the downward lag. So my whole process is basically to think about what are the other options I have. So I see myself that the risk in in US equities or in Canadian equities, as well as in real estate, is much higher now because the market has gone too much upside. And I think from there, it can either move sideways or come down. So if I have extra capital, so I would definitely consider other options like Dubai, either in their equity markets or in their real estate market, because at least the real estate market will generate enough cash flow for me to sustain um, with any potential upside, bonus going forward. But compared to U.S. markets or Canadian markets, I think there is a less upside potential versus more downward side risk.
Okay, there is another thing that I wanted to mention, that are dollar pegged, US dollar pegged. So you don't have to worry about fluctuations, whatever
That's a big
happening,
point.
let's say in Canadian economy or British economy or wherever. So you are having a diversification on different level. It's basically US dollar backed
Yeah,
investments, that whatever you're doing.
it's a very good point because Canadians are now struggling to see their Canadian dollar, losing its value against USD. So if you look at the forex exchange risk from Canadian dollar perspective, it's downward, and with the current economic situation, we are expecting this to continue further deteriorated. So if you want to invest your capital in a forex, FX currency, which has lower, tendency to kind of depreciate, I think Dubai is one of the best options because their currency is pegged against USD. So what's the peg ratio, Wali? Is it like
This is for the USD, it's 3.67.
3.6, and
So
it
basically, if
stays
you're,
constant, right? It doesn't fluctuate heavily.
it's constant for forever. Yeah, it's constant forever. It
So it's a
hasn't
hard
changed.
peg.
Even for the other GCC countries, it's the same.
Yeah, it's a hard peg. So I think that's a good point, and it gives you the assurance that whatever capital you deploy, you actually deploy in a currency which is hard pegged against US dollar. So
Yes,
very important
yes.
point. The other point I wanted to mention here is um, the when you bring the capital in a country like Dubai, it's also very easy to take it out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oftentimes the investor think, if I deploy capital in a foreign country, how easy it is for me to liquidate that asset and move my capital back in my home country. Oftentimes you run into a lot of bureaucratic, process, red tape, paying penalties and all that stuff to before you can actually bring your capital back into your home country. In Dubai, I think there is no issue like that. You can easily liquidate your asset and then move your capital to your home country next day.
100%, 100%. You don't have to worry about that. I mean, but if you want to sell the property within next 6 months, you can just sell the property and take the money wherever you want to. You don't have any embargoes on, let's say, the flight of capital, which is very important for an investor's confidence, because I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of countries implementing that kind of embargo, and that shakes the confidence. Once you do this, people remember that for their lifetime. They don't forget this kind of
Yeah,
things
it
which are
happened in
happening.
Pakistan, right? So even though
Yeah.
we are both from Pakistan, I would think twice before I deploy capital, my foreign capital in Pakistan, because I know that in the past government has, put some, capital flight control. They can do it again, right? So if I deploy my
Exactly.
capital in Pakistan, tomorrow, the new government comes in and they can, block my capital, from
Yeah.
leaving the country. So that could happen. But I think in Dubai, this has I think never happened in the history, which gives enough assurance to the foreign investors to bring the capital in, and they can bring the capital back anytime.
Exactly. I mean, there are pros and cons in Dubai as well. Of course, we've talked about mostly pros, but there are cons as well. And everybody knows that we cannot get citizenship here in this country, and this is how it works. I think this is the reason they have got this whole country as secured as it is right now, because it is kind of close knitted. So rest assured, from the security perspective, it is world class. I think there is no city I have seen with such kind of nationalities all over, and melting pot of all kind of people from all around the world. But it's so secured. You cannot imagine how secure there is misconceptions about racism as well, which I haven't seen at all. On the road, if you do a mistake, you've done a mistake. If a local Emirati makes a mistake, he does a mistake. So it's treated the same way. So there are misconceptions as well. There are, of course, pros investing in Dubai, and there are cons as well. So you have to understand your risk profile. You have to understand your tenure that you want to invest in. In any case, whatever investing that you're doing, it should be long term. It should not be short term or short sighted based on the short sightedness. So that everything has to be taken into consideration. But in totality, I think for diversification there is nothing like Dubai.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Um, I think that's
Correct?
it from this podcast perspective. So, yeah, thanks, Wali, for spending your time with us, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future.
Sure, sure. Nice meeting, and then see you until next time.